touch on that up there. See what you get. That's all right. Click on that.
All right.
Sandra,
I think it's coming.
you just clicked off of it, buddy. There you go. He's got it.
Yep, you're good.
Regular old tech. And
Yeah.
don't worry, I ain't no better. I ain't much better.
I'd like to call this March the 5th meeting of the Kent County Commissioners to order. Will you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America.
to the republic for which it stands,
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's have a moment of silence for the lives that were lost and the property that was lost in Alabama and other places in the South with the tornadoes. Thank you. Okay, we have several public notices. Our next commissioners meeting on March the 19th, we will have a public hearing on the Code Home Rule, solar energy systems. Delmarva Power is hosting a community open house March the 7th, and I believe that's at the Kennedyville Community Center on the line upgrades they're doing. They're going to put in metal poles. Delmarva, that was rescheduled due to inclement weather. And that was, where's that being held? Let's see. That's being held at the library. Okay. Now we have some correspondence from Cindy Stone, from the Director of Community Development Programs, Patrick Sagbert, Gary Fraser, and we're not going to read those because they're pretty lengthy and just don't need to. We now have our regular session minutes and our liquor minutes.
Motion to approve. Second.
In discussion, if not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. We're now to our raffle permits. I'm going to turn this over to our attorney.
Yes,
Tom Yeager.
Commissioners, we have one application for a raffle permit. This is for a fundraiser for the Democratic Club of Kent County, which is taking place at the River God Country Club on May 15th. There's no charge for these permits. Everything seems to be in order.
Make motion to approve. Second.
All those in, any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We have special Class C one-day liquor license applications for nonprofit organizations. There are a number of them, but there's actually 3 organizations that are applying. The first is Chestertown River Arts. They're having a fashion show at the Rock Hall Fire Department on March 23rd. Humane Society is having a fundraiser event on April 13th. And then the rest are for the Community Volunteer Fire Company in Millington. They're having a cornhole tournament, and that tournament is taking place over consecutive weeks, and that's why there's a number of licenses. These are a special one-day license. They have to get a license for each day of the tournament. So these have all been reviewed, and the fees have been paid, and everything seems to be in order.
Make a motion to approve.
Because they're alcohol applications, I think we should ask.
Yes, if there's anybody here to speak for or against any of these, it's a public hearing, so if there's anybody to speak for or against any of the one-day license, the opportunity.
Being none, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Next, we have a public hearing for Class D beer, wine, and liquor license for the Double Tap Tavern LLC. Is there anybody from Double Tap Tavern here? If you could come forward, please. And we're going to need to put you on the record. So, repeat your right hand. You solemnly promise or swear under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give in the matter before us shall be true to the best of your knowledge and belief.
Yes.
Are you both going to testify or just one?
I've been volunteered, so yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Could you please state your name and address for the record?
Cool. It's James Miller, 11916 Locust Grove Road.
And Mr. Miller, could you tell the commissioners a little bit about the establishment that you're opening?
It's an ongoing, it's an establishment, that we bought it from. Group's been there approximately 15 years, and we're continuing similar fashion of small residential area type bar, restaurant, pub food, minimal food, but more lunch type food. So we're going to kind of continue and obviously add our touch to what's been going on there for a number of years.
And Mr. Miller, I think you're aware that the commissioners were very strict on medical sales to under 18.
Yes, sir.
Very important that if you have a violation, they take those things seriously.
Yeah, I might add that I've been in a number of years ago. Managed Mearsmore Marina Realized Dock Bar, a high volume sale place that we had to manage that aggressively. Also, probably our place there, not even though a minor can come in anywhere, probably not as insistent as they were down there. And then outside of doing this here, I also have a security private investigative company where I deal with access control and whatnot. So something I'm very familiar with.
All the health department approvals.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I have.
Okay. And is there anything else you want to say, Mr. Miller?
Just appreciate this is my home community. My family's been here for many years, generations actually, and it's good to come back and serve, maybe have some enjoyment for the community here. So,
Kirby, anything you want to say?
I think you covered it.
Okay. Staff and I have reviewed the application. Everything is in order. The signature check out. So we don't see any problems with this application.
You might want to call see if anybody in the audience has any opposition.
Anybody?
Anybody in the audience?
Being none, I'll make a motion to approve the application.
I second it.
Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
all right. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Good luck.
Okay, our next item of business is public hearing for Code Home Rule Bill 1-2019, the county ends special exemption. This time, I'm going to recluse myself from this hearing because of some perhaps family, personal business done with this particular end. So Ron is going to conduct it.
Okay, Amy, you want to come up and start us off and explain to us a little bit about what we're doing? And while she's coming up, I'll just real quickly go over the way probably we'll run this hearing. I'm going to read you some rules that we generally go by, and we'll see how the night goes, and we'll don't let none of this scare you. It's our desire that everyone who wishes to contribute to this democratic process be given a fair and uninterrupted opportunity to be heard. To ensure equal opportunity for individual input for the topic under discussion, certain rules must be followed by all persons who are here to testify. The rules to govern our hearings are few, but are intended to guide our proceedings. The hope is that each person testifying will be self-governed, thereby contributing to fairness for all. The chair will remind anyone who testifies when he or she has violated the rules of the proceeding. Rule 1, please sign the testimony log if you desire to speak during the hearings. It's located in the back there. Rule 2, all speakers must identify themselves and use the area designated for purpose of testifying, and will use the microphone up front here. Each person testifying will have 3 minutes for his or her remarks. The chair will maintain order by way of voice command, stick to the issues at hand. And I think what we'll do after Amy gets done introducing this text amendment and explaining it to us, I think what we'll do is, I'm assuming that there's attorneys from maybe both sides of this issue. I think I'm right. And what I think we'll do is let both attorneys take turns and come up, give opening statements. We'll open it up to everyone else who wants to testify, and then I'll give both attorneys like 3 minutes at the end for a little rebuttal, and then we'll go from there. And I just want to announce that if anything you forget that you want to say or something, we are going to be receiving written comments until Friday, March the 8th at 12 noon. So that's the way we'll handle it. Amy, you want to start us off?
Cliff Road Properties LLC submitted an application to amend Article 7, Section 7.16F of the Land Use Ordinance. This is the Country Inn Special Exception use. And that use is specifically applicable to the extension or enlargement in structures in the agricultural zoning district, resource conservation district, rural character, rural residential, critical area residential, community residential, and marine zoning district. The applicant proposes to replace the limitation standard with a requirement which addresses consistency of feature and character of any extensions or enlargements of principal structures and accessory structures that existed prior to August 1st, 1989. Specifically, the language that is proposed to be stricken from the list of provisions reads that exterior changes to the site structure are minimized, extension or enlargement of principal accessory structures may not exceed 50% of the gross floor area of each individual building above that which existed as of August 1st, 1989, replacing that language with extension or enlargement of principal and accessory structures should maintain features and character that are consistent with the structure that existed as of 1989. There are many lodging industry uses that are addressed in the land use ordinance, and there are a few of them which do address limitations of 50% expansion, and those uses are generally located within the agricultural zoning district and in the resource conservation district, and those uses are for retreats and rural inns. So you did receive the the staff report that went to the Planning Commission with this application, which outlines some of the land use provisions. The Planning Commission did review this application in a public hearing at their August 2nd meeting, and the Planning Commission has sent an unfavorable review recommendation of this application, citing that there was a lack of support from the general lodging industry, specifically related to country inns, so the Planning Commission did not make a finding of public need. Another finding was that the impact of the proposed amendment on all zoning districts in which a country inn is permitted had not been addressed, and the Planning Commission further expressed a concern that the Critical Area Commission opined in a letter to the Planning Commission that they felt as though that the text amendment may not be consistent with the Resource Conservation District.
Okay, that it? Would Sonia, you want to get the list, the sign-up sheet? And let's start with the proponent. If, Dan, I assume that's you. Okay, and then Phil.
Oh, you ready?
You're on.
By the way, I want to thank you for the table. That's a nice new addition. Although when I was sitting there watching, I was reminded of the last time I was on an airplane, and when the captain wanted to come out and use the bathroom, they ran a cart across the entrance to the kitchen area to, never mind. Had nothing to do with why you have a table here.
Thank the clerk. I think the clerk had a lot to do with the table.
Okay, well, now that safety is assured, I just want to talk, and Amy touched on some of these points, but this is a proposal that really only applies to the one category of use, which is country inns. And to create a new country inn or significantly change the use of an existing one, anyone wanting to do that has to go through a rigorous site plan review by the Planning Commission, through a special exception review by the Planning Commission and the Board of Appeals, and adhere to numerous environmental health department and critical area regulations. They're going to be limited to 15 rooms no matter what. And they must occupy a structure that existed in 1989. This amendment changes none of those requirements. It does eliminate one restriction on the expansion of footprint. And that expansion will still be subject to all the existing environmental and critical area restrictions. That expansion will, and that restriction will still be subject to all the existing gauntlet of administrative reviews. In return, the new legislation adds a new additional requirement that the features and character of the historic structures are maintained by the new structures. Now, there are limited lodging and hospitality facilities in our county. It makes sense to improve those that exist in order to expand tourism and the hospitality industry in our county. The United States economy is screaming along at 4% growth. I don't think Kent County is. We have almost full employment in our country. I don't think Kent County does. Our tax base and our tax revenues are not what they ought to be. 2 significant restaurants have closed in our county, and others are struggling. Many of our marinas are still trying to keep their heads above water. Our comprehensive plan sets forth the county's major strategies for improving its economy. And attracting new business is a major goal, but we wisely have focused on the strategy of supporting those businesses that have already invested in Kent County. Now, the first priority is to keep them in business. And the second priority is to help them grow. Helping one or more country inns survive and grow doesn't just benefit that country inn. It helps a host of other businesses that benefit as well. Likewise, keeping special events at local venues has an immense effect on other county businesses as well. Guest staying at local B&Bs and hotels. They patronize local restaurants and bars. Rehearsal dinners are a huge factor in the success of local restaurants. Guests shop in stores and farmers markets. Local caterers benefit. Event companies benefit. Table and chairs rental companies benefit. Musicians benefit, local limo services benefit, and the employees of all these ancillary businesses benefit. In turn, these other businesses support their suppliers, their accountants, their insurance vendors, their lawyers, and the papers, magazines, and radio stations that they advertise in. It is inaccurate and short-sighted to say that this type of legislation is only aimed at a handful of businesses and serves no public need. It is exactly the kind of assistance to local business that is expressly contemplated by the comprehensive plan. Successful business begets other successful businesses. Great Oak Manor has an event. Great Oak Landing benefits. Great Oak Landing has an event. Great Oak Manor benefits. Tourism attracts people. Business generates more business. Better business generates even more business. People come here, leave their money, and go home. That is the definition of an export economy. Kent County has, I think, wisely hitched its wagon to tourism to improve its sagging economy. Country inns and event venues are a critical component of the export business that is tourism. In that context, every business that survives, every business that grows, has a ripple effect on other businesses. Conversely, every business that fails hurts other businesses. That's why this bill is endorsed by the Director of Economic Development, by the Kent County Economic Development Commission, by the Director of the Chamber of Commerce, and by a number of local businesses. Any small business owner will tell you that small margins of profit make the difference between life and death in a small business. The inability to expand a business can often threaten its future. This explains why we changed our country inn ordinance in 2002 to allow 15 rooms instead of 10. Certainly, the inability to expand a country inn that has been in existence for many, many years to those 15 rooms can threaten the future of the business. That's why we're here. That's why this bill is before you, and I urge you to adopt it. Do you have any questions of me?
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Bill?
Good evening.
So my name's Phil Hoon, and I'm here on behalf of an organization called the Cliff Road Concerned Citizens, CRCC. There are others here who may want to speak, which is fine. But the folks I represent are the homeowners along Cliff Road to the north of Great Oak Manor. And they are seriously, to put it mildly, opposed to this legislation. A number of them are going to speak after I do, so I'm just going to kind of hit the high points that I think you should consider in rendering your decision. The first one is your Planning Commission. Your Planning Commission had 2 afternoons of hearings, and they recommended unanimously to a recommendation of denial. And they determined, and that was a vigorous discussion, and they determined the real benchmark that there was no public need for this legislation. What Mr. Saunders has presented, I think, could be characterized as an individual need for the legislation, which is Great Oak Manor, the applicant for this legislation. And Mr. Saunders is correct that one of the endorsements of the Kent County Comprehensive Plan is economic growth. But it doesn't say economic growth at all expense to all other people. If anything, the comprehensive plan, embedded in the comprehensive plan, is the idea of fair treatment to neighbors. And nobody is entitled to a leg up at the expense of others. I don't think zoning is an economic, fundamentally an economic discussion. It's a component of it. If one would look at the Great Oak Manor website, one would think that they're not having any great problems. If one would go out there on any weekend during the summer, one would come to that same conclusion. Lots of cars, lots of action, lots of noise, lots of fun, people having a good time. That's an important facility for Kent County. But where is the reason for it to be expanded when there's 10 or so properties who every Saturday night or Friday night have to endure really, well, your law enforcement people can tell you the number of calls they get. The question is more needed? And my clients suggest not. If anything, maybe some control needs to be put on it. And if Kent County wants to grow this industry, and I think it's growing organically and happily for Kent County as well, you know, in Kent County, there's no limitation on the hours of operation, where the people park, or, you know, every other use has a parking requirement. And, you know, maybe the time is for the county to address this type of use, but it's not in the piecemeal fashion that's proposed here that's singularly intended for one owner. So the Planning Commission's letter is quite articulate. No public need, lack of support of others in the industry. Another thing that letter says is that the impact on all districts has not been considered. The 4 or 5 zoning districts that are subject to this. And lastly, the Critical Area Commission letter, which is important, and you should read it, because what it's saying is, if you pass this legislation as written, it's going to have to go back to the full Critical Area Commission because it impacts on properties in the Resource Conservation District. To go to that Critical Area letter, Commission, it's dated January 21st, 2018, it says, this legislation would be a, quote, impermissible expansion of structures would allow the impermissible expansion of structures in the Resource Conservation District. So you've got 2 significant authorities, one statewide, one local, saying, no, don't do this. They're not saying don't consider something like this, but they're saying, as written, this doesn't pass muster. Now, your Economic Development Board sent a letter on February 19th of this year, a couple weeks ago, and certainly they should endorse what's perceived to be economic growth. And maybe a component of this legislation does facilitate or encourage or enhance economic growth. But you have to balance that growth against the impact on others. I mean, in our agricultural district, when you have a poultry house, there's a setback to it. It's a setback so that, sure, that's an important economic use. It's really one of the vital ones, agriculture and tourism, like tourism. But there are setbacks to be fair to the neighbors. In this case, this property went from a B&B in the 1980s and has expanded over time and is really nice, and there's a lot of nice events there. But there is a point, like filling up a glass of water, that you can't, that's enough. And in this case, and some of these folks will speak to you, they're living next door to what's not a country inn, and it's not a B&B. it's a different kind of use. It's more like a resort. So, you know, I understand the Economic Development Commission approval. It's kind of too bad that they don't have a public hearing, like the Planning Commission and like you. If they're going to ascribe a letter saying there's economic benefit to this legislation, well, there might be an economic detriment to this legislation, which is the diminished property values of the people who are impacted by it. And that should be factored, and I think the Economic Board can judge that. But the way it was presented to them, I don't know how it was presented to them. I don't know who gets notice of that. I know on the website it announces it, but that just happened. And I'm going to be brief here, but a couple things I more want to say. The burden of proof is on the applicant here to satisfy the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance. And the articulation of one benefit, economic benefit for one property owner, doesn't seem to accomplish that global goal. Spot zoning is an idea, and in Maryland, you're not supposed to just take one property and spot zone it to give it a benefit. It's illegal, and there's plenty of case law on it. And the most egregious example of that would be if someone has a farm and they come and say, hey, zone a little corner of my farm for a gas station. But nobody else gets that benefit. That's spot zoning. That's not going to make it if it's contested. In this case, this legislation is pretty clearly intended to help one property. You don't see, unless we'll see when the testimony comes, is any other country in or B&B or anybody else supporting this? You know, and maybe you want to defer this question to Mr. Yeager, but I think the case could be made that this is de facto, essentially, spot zoning. Another problem, well, a couple things here. It's summarily concluded in the presentation and articulation of this legislation that there's that the 50% limitation that exists now is no longer valid. And I don't really understand that. I think that 50% legislation is, 50% limitation is applicable to everybody. I think if you peel back the onion, I think the answer is the Great Oak Manor has already expanded by 50%. But the property hasn't expanded. And there's no reason, if there was a good reason for that limitation before, and no one's challenged it other than this particular property, that again goes to the question of, this is legislation for one property owner. This is spot zoning. You know, kind of in summary here, and then I'll let those folks who want to testify. One more substantive comment. This legislation includes the language that this expansion, this permitted expansion, must maintain the character of the structure. My question to you is, who is going to decide that? I don't think we have a lot in our zoning ordinance that is subjective. Subjective meaning it's in the eye of the beholder. I might think it maintains the character, but you might not. And why would we put something as discretionary and arbitrary in the ordinance as that? To be honest with you, if someone's going to expand, they've got to comply with the building code and get a building permit, but who's to tell the owner of Great Oak or anybody else what it should look like? And that does happen in historic Chestertown because there's an ordinance, historic district ordinance, and that's applicable to everybody. But that language in there, I really, who's going to decide that? Is Amy going to decide that in a building permit application? Planning Commission decide it? Board of Appeals decide it? even if you're inclined to, even if you're convinced that maybe something needs to be fixed, to allow country inns and B&Bs to expand and be competitive, I would just say do it right. Include everything. Include hours of operation. Include impacts on neighbors. Include everything. All this does is just creates an opportunity for someone to, throttle up what's already there and throw in a very arbitrary standard. And, at the end of the day, whether that arbitrary standard is in there or not, this is about the impact on the neighbors. And what's good for one person is not good for everybody. And what Kent County is about, and there's all sorts of limitations in every industry, but it's about being fair to the neighbors. And that's all these neighbors are concerned about, my clients. I've talked to them. They said it's been neat having Great Oak Manor there and, the other Great Oak Marina. But it's reached the tipping point, even without this legislation. And that, that may have legs this summer when, depending on how many weddings are there and what occurs. But there's no reason to do this now. I don't know when the next Kent County Comprehensive Zoning is coming up. Maybe Amy can answer that for you. But when it does, that will be a time to address this and address it for all with proper consultants and proper experts. Zoning text amendments, they're supposed to be for when there's a real problem. Because generally zoning goes from one comprehensive zoning 5 or 10 years later to another one. And I just don't think that the applicants made the case that there's a problem here. It's a pretty successful, it's a pretty nice facility, and they can carry forward as they are, and that's the reason why this should be denied. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. First person on the sheet is Ms. Janet Christensen.
Janet Christensen Lewis, and I live in Millington, Maryland. And I'm here to support the neighbors' position that this would be a major impact on their lives. The Division of Tourism, Jamie, has put forth a letter to support this, and she has put in incredible amounts of language in there about tourism and how important it is. And Mr. Saunders has put forth how important it is to our tourism and how it impacts on it's in accordance with our comprehensive plan. But nowhere have you heard the numbers. They were asked, because I was there at the Planning Commission, what the numbers are. What impact will this have? Are we talking about thousands and thousands of dollars that we'll have on our community? Or are we talking about hundreds of dollars? Because that makes a difference when you're going to have an impact on somebody's home. If the county were going to have such a grand benefit from this, that it could overcome the negative impacts that this will have on the neighbors, you could vote for this easily. But if you don't know what those numbers are, and you don't know how much it's going to impact the local economy, is it really fair to ask these neighbors to probably give up some of the equity that they have in their properties? Because I know that I probably wouldn't choose to live next door to something that was going to disrupt my every Friday, Saturday night in the summertime. And then the second point is, we don't know how many other homes will be impacted by this, because no other country inn has stepped forward to say, oh, I want to support this. But we still don't know, because the county hasn't been able to tell us, if in fact there's other country inns out there who may step forward at some point in time and want to do this, and what homes might be impacted by that. So you have two choices here. Either this is an ordinance that's specifically tailored to this applicant, or it's an ordinance that is countywide that could have a major impact on more than just this group of homeowners. And I think as you're going forward to look at this, you do have to balance between this property owner's right for expanding a business beyond what the code asks for by giving this text amendment, and all of those people who are living there, who have invested their money in Kent County because this is where they wanted to be. Was that a red flag for me? Shut up. And so I would ask that you give an unfavorable to this text amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And look, we're going to try very hard. This is to everyone, but if something's already been said, I mean, I think we heard very clearly from both attorneys where this case is going, and we want you all to feel free to say what you want to say, but if we can try to not repeat what somebody else says as we go through and make us get done a little quicker. Ms. Vita Pickram.
Different kind of setting for me. I wrote my remarks so that I wouldn't forget to say anything important. I'm Vita Pickram. I live at 10590 Cliff Road. To the Kent County Commissioners, I'm submitting this letter to encourage you to support the recommendation of the Kent County Planning Commission to deny the request of Great Oak Manor, operating under another name, to change the designation of the property on Cliff Road. I have lived at 10590 Cliff Road for over 20 years, and I'm a direct neighbor of Great Oak Manor. Our property lines are side by side. I have known the owners of Great Oak Manor since Diane Cantor, followed by the Fetuses, where each family lived at the property. They were our neighbors and had the same values and concern for the quality of life in the community. They owned and managed the bed and breakfast with overnight guests and hosted weddings and parties within the confines of their building with the occasional outdoor tent events. Because they were concerned neighbors, they were very conscientious about the noise levels of their events, unruly guests on the grounds, and traffic demands on the limited private road to get to our properties. I mention the road because it is so narrow that on one of the Cantor's guests tried to pass another oncoming car and drove off into one of the ditches that borders each side of the road. It is truly a one-car road. In fact, previous owners would express concern that their guests felt the noise, music, voices coming from Great Oak Marina destroyed the peaceful respite that they were seeking in looking at that establishment. Oftentimes, the Marina's management would try to keep the noise down and stop the music at an acceptable hour. The current owners do not live in the property or in Kent County, and therefore cannot have any idea about the impact their current operation has on our community and what they are proposing would have on our neighbors. We already contend with the noise of the Great Oak Marina, and now Great Oak Manor is really asking too much of a very small community. The current operations have music so loud that practically at every event I must call to ask them to turn the music down from the band or DJ. Our sunroom has a direct view of the proposed permanent tent and within a few feet of it, and I believe Mr. Mason, your son, owns the tent company. My grandchildren can hear bolstering voices from partygoers, occasional cursing and vulgar statements, and restricts them from watching a simple TV show during the noise on the weekend. President Mason, at the last League of Women Voters Forum for County Commissioners, in your closing remarks, you raised a picture of your grandchildren and expressed that you were running for office for them to provide a quality life for them in this county. Well, all of us have grandchildren as well, and we want the same for them. Again, I ask the Board of County Commissioners to support its own Planning Commission of Kent County volunteers, who have unanimously voted against the request of the Great Oak Manor Group. Also, the decisions to be made for personal gain of oneself, not should be made for personal gain of oneself or a family member. You are to represent the needs of all residents of Kent County. I am one of them, and I'm asking for your support.
Is, I think, Ken Fry? I'm sorry.
Thank you. Good evening. First of all, I'd like to say Mr. Mason, Tom, as I know, has made a very difficult decision, very honorable, and I respect you for that. So, thank you. Good evening. I'm Ken Fry. I've been a resident on Cliff Road since 1972 for 47 years. I've personally observed the many changes at Great Oak Manor under at least 7 different owners. Currently, Cliff Road Properties, LLC. Yes, the applicant has been forthcoming in admitting that one of their objectives is to build a permanent tent platform for special events. Special events, namely weddings, seem to be the underlying purpose for the ZTA and being used as leverage under the thin veil of public need and economic benefit to area businesses. Let's be truthful about the ZTA. It is primarily for the benefit of the applicant, and yes, there would be spin-off benefits for area businesses, all at the cost of sacrificing the quality of life enjoyed by neighboring residents who purchased property in Kent County when Great Oak Manor was operating primarily as a B&B. For nearly 30 years, occasional weddings have been held at Great Oak Manor without objections from neighbors. We lived in peaceful harmony with the owners and activities held there. In the past 3 years, this has changed, with Great Oak Manor's focus transferring from a B&B with an occasional wedding to, as taken from their website, a premier destination for weddings, corporate retreats, and group rentals. The frequency of special events has increased, the typical event size has increased, and the noise levels have increased dramatically, which is why many of us are here tonight. Frequency, size, noise, and most important, increased traffic and safety on our already over-abused and under-maintained private road. While I respect the elected county officials in their endeavor to promote economic development, I'm adamantly opposed to this zoning text amendment. Great Oak Manor is situated in a rural residential neighborhood with 14, actually more than that, neighboring houses. And by all appearances, this ZTA is clearly for the sole benefit of the applicant and not for country inns throughout Kent County. The ZTA received a unanimous unfavorable decision by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Great Oak Manor is 1.26 miles from the nearest public road, with sections of the poorly maintained private road 14 feet in total width, with no shoulder and steep drop-offs on both sides of the road. This threat to safety will only be increased with planned growth in weddings and special events at Great Oak Manor. The Kent County Department of Public Works was requested to perform a safety assessment of the private roads leading to Great Oak Manor. Their response, dated 24th of July 2018, was, and I quote, as the road is not on the county inventory, the road is privately owned and maintained and responsible for upkeep and improvements for whatever reason, as well as public access, would rest with the property owners. We therefore must deny your request for performing a safety inspection. No considerations for traffic mitigations have been considered as part of the ZTA. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Bruce Galton.
Evening. I'm Bruce Galton. We have property at 10626 Cliff Road. My wife and I bought probably 12 years ago after a long search on the Eastern Shore, and we just love where we live. Good. And we want to keep it that way. Before I start with my remarks, a lot of what was suggested in the opening remarks by the applicant's attorney made it sound like this is a binary decision. That if this isn't passed, suddenly everybody he does business with, he has to stop doing business with, and that's just not true. So you got to keep that in mind as we start. This is not a binary decision that affects everybody. It stays the same is what we're trying to get to. So in looking at this, you have to ask yourself, is there a county-wide problem so dire, so big, that the only cure is to change the county laws? I would say absolutely not. This is not affecting anybody except how many country inns are there? 3, 4? The only one who applied after all these years is one applicant. Nobody came to the planning meetings to support that from his industry. It's a one-person application. And when looking at this, where we live is the critical area residential zone, let's look at the law. I mean, certainly you know it by heart. Article 5, Section 5.1, the statement of intent for this area, and this is a quote, this district is intended to allow low-density residential development in areas where the impact on the natural environment is minimal. So allowing a country inn by special exception, there's a body of law that goes with that that puts constraints on it to keep a low footprint. And those are logical rules. The number of rooms, the number of people that can eat there, the size of the buildings. It's to keep a low-density footprint in a critical area for low-density housing. Opening it up with permanent tent sites to make it an event site instead of a country inn is the direct opposite of what the purpose of this zone is for. I got one more minute. Okay, then I'll jump to the end. You got to remember that you're supposed to have rules to minimize the effect on the property owners in the neighborhood. That's all in the land use ordinance. And this ZTA doesn't really solve a problem. And in fact, it actually creates a problem. And I thank you for your time.
Mr. Galton, if you, because you obviously didn't finish everything, if you want to turn that testimony in,
I submitted a letter, and practically all this is in it. So hopefully, if you read the letter I submitted that's in your packet,
do that.
It'll save a lot of time. Thank you.
Is it Ms. Katie Galton?
Hi, my name's Katie Galton, and I live with Bruce at 10626 Cliff Road. Really, quite eloquently, my neighbors have said a lot of the things that I was planning to say. I just would add that, really, in summary for me, as Bruce mentioned, the current zone has limits on what can be done within our area. And also, the country inn has the limits of what can be done. And to me, looking at the ZTA, you're taking the limits away. And I really encourage you to uphold the planning board's recommendation on this, because that will help protect the limits that we deserve as neighbors. Thanks.
Thank you. Adam Snyder.
Good evening, Adam Snyder, 22360 Great Oak Landing Road. I believe I'm the only one here from the actual Great Oak Landing Road. Everyone else is from Cliff Road. I see everything that goes past my house. I see all the traffic that goes in, out. I'm completely opposed to this amendment that's trying to be made. I bought my house a year and a half ago trying to find the country setting, which I did. I used to live on Route 20, which is a very busy road. I wanted to move away from there, raise my children in a nice small community. They could play on the street. I'm just going to feel that it's not going to happen, because come Thursday and Friday, trucks are coming in, delivering equipment for events back there. Buses are all weekend long, limos, cars. It's just, come the weekend, I don't feel safe if my children want to play on the road. I mean, granted, they're only 2 and a year old, but I want them to grow up and be able to do this. I just don't feel that it's going to be safe with if they're planning on expanding, I just don't feel safe with all this extra added traffic on the road. And like everyone else has said, it's a private road. It's not built for more traffic than what's already there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jamie Williams.
So I'm Jamie Williams, Kent County Economic Development. So over the past weekend, I reviewed the information that you received in the Commissioner's packet regarding Code Home Rule 1-2019, Country Inn Special Exceptions. The letters and comments reference a specific business, and that is not what's being decided with this ZTA. This zoning text amendment would allow any existing and future country inns the flexibility to diversify their business. The opposition is citing unrestricted growth, expansion, and build-out if the zoning text amendment is approved. This is, in fact, not accurate. Country inns are limited by the number of rooms and the basic zoning standards for their particular zoning district. Then they must, in addition, they must go through the special exception process, which adds additional standards and restrictions. And projects would be required to go through site plan approval process and the Board of Appeals special exception review. During that special exception review is when the nature of the proposed site, including the size, shape, and the proposed size and shape of the arrangement of structures, traffic patterns, the nature of surrounding area, the proximity of existing dwellings, houses of worship, schools, public structures, and other places of public gathering, the impact of the development of the project on community facilities and services, preservation of cultural and historic landmarks, significant natural features and trees, probable effect of noise, vibration, smoke, and particle matter, toxic matter, odor, fire, explosive hazards, the glare upon of surrounding properties, the purpose and intent of the ordinance. And I'm not going to read them all, but it does continue on. So there are other restrictions that have to be met. The zoning and text amendment removes the current arbitrary language and replaces it with the language that allows growth while maintaining the character of the structures. As the Planning Commission pointed out, the zoning text amendment does support many of the economic strategies within the comprehensive plan. The lack of support from the general lodging industry and specifically other country inns should not be viewed as opposition. Our business owners are busy, and this is a complicated issue that takes a lot of time. Regarding the critical area commission's letter referenced in the Planning Commission's response, any project would still have to comply with all critical area regulations and all plan review requirements. The public need, in my opinion, is part of the economic development is to improve the business climate in a community, and removing barriers, regulations, and fees achieve that part of economic development. Thank you.
Thank you. Jamie. Bronwyn Fry.
I'm Bronwyn Fry. I live at 10650 Cliff Road, Chestertown. I have something to say in addition to what the last person said. Operating a country inn in a rural residential community in Kent County is labeled a special exception by our zoning laws. Let's call it what it is. It's a privilege. It's a privilege to operate a commercial business in a residential neighborhood. In establishing a new country inn, the owner must adhere to general allowances regarding number of rooms, observation of limits on square footage expansion, etc. This is to maintain an appropriate size, purpose, and scope for the business in its special exception setting. These allowances are clearly defined in the current zoning laws. So, the neighborhood supports the special exception for the commercial activity in their neighborhood in exchange for what? Guarantees by the country inn owner to abide by the zoning laws that maintain the character of the neighborhood and protect it from overdevelopment and associated negative impacts of uncontrolled growth. If the county zoning law is changed by this ZTA to eliminate the square footage expansion limits, what will be the result? It will not build the business of country inns and tourism in Kent County, but will instead be detrimental to the establishment of new country inns. Why? In order to become a country inn, a business owner must have the support of his community for the special exception. If the owner of a prospective country inn goes to his neighbors asking for the privilege of operating a business among them, what are the chances of getting this support with no building expansion limits attached? Not likely. it would effectively eliminate country inns from Kent County's comprehensive plan goal to expand tourism. This is not smart growth, but the haphazard grant of a special exception to a special exception. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a petition signed by over 100 residents of Kent County that does not, it just addresses
You can
the petition.
turn that in and
Yeah,
we'll make
I'm gonna
it part
turn
of
that
the
in.
record.
I have 5 more letters from people that asked me to submit them for them.
Thank you very much.
Okay, all of this.
Mr. William Pickram.
Good evening. I'm William W. Pickram. I live at 10590 Cliff Road in Great Oak. Without regurgitating what has been said before, the unfortunate thing is Kent County does not have a noise ordinance. Even if it did, it'd be very difficult to enforce. Living directly next door to this facility is very detrimental to the peace and comfort of my home. Of course, there'd be a loss of value plus, but also the loss of value for a lot of building a platform, which is envisioned would be an impervious surface, it's in the critical area, and of a country inn, but this business is not in danger of failure. Okay? Just wants to make more profit. But what's important that the quality of life in our neighborhood would be adversely affected by the approval of this zoning text amendment. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pickram.
Plenty of time.
That concludes the speakers. Now, Dan, you went first. We'll have a chance for each one of the attorneys to have a little rebuttal. I appreciate it if you could keep it to 3 minutes or so, 3 or 4 minutes. So, Phil, you want to go first this time? He went first the last time. I was just going to reverse it if you'd like.
I will be brief, because so much has been said that it doesn't need to be reset. So Ms. Williams commented that the zoning text amendment, looking at it at its broadest, is applicable to other properties other than Great Oak Manor. And your planning commission is very vigorous in assuring that people at that hearing and others similar don't speak about specific properties. But I appreciate your willingness to hear, because after all, what's the best way to understand how the zoning text amendment will work? What better way to do it than applying it to a specific property? And that's what's been done here. And when you look at that text amendment with this property, it's not a good thing. It doesn't, again, I won't reiterate. So if a country inn's limited to 15 rooms now, why do you need an unlimited expansion? If you've got your 15 rooms, what are you doing? And what you're doing is what Great Oak is doing. It's not an expansion of a country inn. It's an expansion of a use that isn't even articulated or defined in Kent County, which is this kind of wedding venue place. I think Queen Anne's County's dealt with it and others have. So all I'm saying is, it's a bit of a wolf in sheep clothing. This isn't about expanding country inn. This is about expanding something else. And then when you look at it, if it really is, as it seems to be, a opportunity to build a tent platform, how can that possibly maintain the character of a country inn? I mean, do you know of any country inns that have tent platforms? No. It's a different use. And it's just another reason why this legislation should be denied. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Dan?
Thank you. We are the proponents, and I'm not at home, I get the last word. A couple things. I heard council referring to spot zoning. Spot zoning is reclassifying a piece of land, period, to a different zoning classification. We're not doing that. This doesn't propose to do that. This proposed change, as we have heard many complaints about tonight, has applicability throughout the county. That means it cannot possibly be spot zoning because it has countywide applicability. It is the opposite of spot zoning. We have heard the refrain before that the opponents want to hear the numbers. The problem is that the numbers have to do with us, and this isn't about us. This is about a restraint in the ordinance that prevents the expansion of an important business in our county. But one thing that's pretty clear, if this business fails, and if you're in business, you understand that tiny margins can make the difference. And you also understand that if you cannot grow, you're dying a slow death, maybe some slower than others. But growth is an important component of success in business. I've heard a lot about noise and wedding venues. If Great Oak wanted to solve the noise problem by building a venue room to have wedding events and take care of that transmission of sound, they can today because they can't expand. So you have to give the business owner the ability to decide how he's going to survive. And you have to take away particularly arbitrary impediments. 50% expansion, what's that based on? What does it mean? Why is it there? And, you know, we all pay lip service to helping business and removing obstacles, but this is where the rubber meets the road. This is a perfect opportunity to do that, and I ask you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this will conclude our hearing. As I pointed out in the beginning, we will still take written comments until Friday, March the 8th at noon. And more importantly, I want to thank everybody that has participated in tonight's public hearing in such a professional manner. And I know that sometimes issues like this can get somewhat controversial and things, but as it happens so many times in Kent County, we're able to come together and talk about an issue in a very professional manner, and that means a lot to us, and I thank you all for that. So that concludes this hearing. And we will, I guess, I don't know when the date, March the 19th, I'm assuming is a Tuesday night, and we will be making a decision that day, or it will be announced anyhow on March the 19th, our decision. So thank you very much, and again, thank you for your professionalism in testifying on both sides. Back on duty, bud.
No, he did. We're now ready for Public Works Director, Mike Mullins.
Good evening. I have 3 items for you tonight. The first item on your agenda is the award of a contract for improvements and renovation to the Skinner's Neck Public Landing boat ramp. If the commissioners recall, we had put this out to bid late spring last year because there was a delay in getting the Army Corps of Engineers permit, and we only received one bid that was a high bid. So due to the late in the year, the contractors were busy. We only had the one bid. So we went and rebid the project here in early spring. We had 4 bidders, and we're recommending the award of the bid to, let's see, I guess it's called Diekelman's Pile Driving LLC. Did I get that right? Okay. Good Pennsylvania Dutch in me. What we did with this one to see that we were in budget was we broke the project up into replacement of the concrete boat ramp, and then also there's a pier that was going to be built alongside of it. So we could, in case the bids came in high, we could award one or the other. In this case, we're recommending the total award for the project, which the bid amount is $58,000 for both the replacement of the ramp and construction of the pier. They're looking to be able to start within the window that the permit allows in March here. So we pulled the contract together. I believe we have the signed contract from the contractor. We're looking for an award of this project.
And it's within budget?
It's in budget. What we're doing is diverting some excess funding we had from the wood grinding operation. We were fortunate this year, not a lot of storms, so our budget for that came in. So that's part of our environmental operations division, so we're putting that extra funding towards it.
I make a motion to approve the project.
Is there any other discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
The second item we have is at your last meeting on the 5th, you approved a request for 4 water allocations for the tax map parcel 46, parcel 126, lot 1, which is the former restaurant there outside of Rock Hall. This document that we submitted is the Public Works Agreement that would finalize that approval that you gave. Typically, from what I understand, Shelley, talking to Sharon, it's not a motion needed. It was already approved. So it's just in your packets for signature as informational. Questions on that? The last item that I had was a request. We got a letter from Chestertown High School Alumni Association where they're looking to make a donation of $500 to assist with the cost of some sidewalk repairs at the Ag Center. What we did was following up with the Ag Center because they have some concrete work that they're looking at doing, and we needed to coordinate with them, so we had some time trying to get everybody together. Jim Wright, our county engineer, will be meeting with Annie Coleman, who wrote the original letter, as well as some members from the Ag Center this Saturday to take a look at the sidewalks and get a better idea where Ms. Coleman was looking at having these improvements done. I just wanted to update you on the information on that correspondence.
It's kind of going to be my recommendation after reading it. I don't particularly think we need to take their $500 because it's used by a lot of people in the county, and if it's, I leave it up to you all to take a look at it. If it's a worthwhile project, if something needs to be done there to make it to be able to be used better by the ag people and the fair and this, maybe we just make a project out of it. But it was a very generous offer, but I think it probably come back to us and with some kind of quote, and then we'll talk about it again. But I think it's a worthwhile project personally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd agree with Ronnie. I think we should. I mean, I've been down there at the fairgrounds quite a bit, and what Ms. Coleman says is true. It's a disaster waiting to happen. And if you remember those old sidewalks there when that was a Nike base, they went somewhere then, but they don't go anywhere now. Some of them, and there's been more buildings built, and I don't think it's probably a big budget item, but I certainly think it would make an improvement and certainly be I don't know who, if someone was to fall down there and break a leg, I guess that's our liability. I don't know. But
With the age of, as you said, with the old Nike base, those are very old sidewalks. We wanted to get a good look at the overall condition, as well as what she was asking for the extension to one of the other pavilions. And then Jim, talking to the Ag Center, they have a contractor looking to do some concrete work. Doing a floor in one of the buildings, I think.
Yeah.
Take it away from him, Sandra. If you don't know how to play...
It's electronics. I'm a civil engineer. Yeah, it's good. That was my last thing. I dropped the mic. All right, so yes, we'll get back to you on that. Once we get some more information, we'll come up with a plan.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Mike, before you were to leave, I just have a couple questions. The building at Wharton Park, what's the status on that, or what?
The building.
The maintenance building.
Oh, the maintenance building. We'll be coming to you at the next meeting with a proposal for putting in the first phase building. It came in high in budget because what we needed to do was address dealing with the moving of the shop and providing conditioning of the storage area. That a lot of the stuff that's stored in the old skating rink that we have to worry about, like paper and some of the mats, that they don't get mold and what on that. So, and we also had to move the restrooms out. So the project got this first phase of it was a little more expensive because of the utilities and providing that room on it. So we came up with that. Now there was some site work that has to be done and paving. We're trying to work in diverting some of that to the second phase that we'll be asking for in the FY20 budget to build the second building. So we'll be coming to you with a proposal at the next meeting. Yep.
And then on the Village of Kinderville, what's the status on that?
We had a meeting, Sally and I had a meeting, was it Thursday, last Thursday, I believe it was, with the developer, the landowner, and the home builder that's working with them on that. And they advanced an idea of a proposal to do some additional home building. We asked them to submit that and clarify that in writing. I haven't received anything yet in terms of that. And we expressed, some of the history. We went over that, and we have the concern that's ongoing that we've talked with the solicitor about as far as the road access that we need to clear up. And that was one of the things Mr. Gray was going to look into to see if we could help us to get that first phase turned over. So we're waiting for a response back from them on the proposal, and then we can come with any recommendations back to you on that.
Okay, how long do you think that's?
I would have.
So I'm guessing it's going to be pretty quick.
Yeah. I'm not surprised we didn't get anything today, but they're probably working something out. I think they're going to do a little research and stuff too on it. Well.
Okay.
Okay.
All righty. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marty?
Marty, you can come up. I don't know whether any of them mics are going to work anymore.
He destroyed them all.
I have a clogged ear, so I'll probably talk loud anyway because I can't really hear. All right. Good evening. I'm here tonight seeking approval to fill a vacancy in the Public Works Department and County Roads for a motor equipment operator. The vacancy was created when an employee was unable to return to work at the end of FMLA leave. The position was advertised for 2 weeks, resulting in 6 applications. 3 of the applicants, which all had their CDL, were selected for interviews and were interviewed on February 21st and 22nd. The individual listed has plenty of experience, has a CDL Class A, and we're seeking approval to hire the individual as an MEO2 due to his equipment experience and CDL license at the recommended salary listed.
Motion to approve.
Second. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
that's all I have, unless there's anything you need from me.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you kindly.
Shelley?
Okay, I have 2 items for action in front of you and a few report outs after we finish with those. The first is Senate Bill 850. This is a tax exemption, sales and use tax exemption for qualified computer technology. What this would be for is data centers and the expansion of data centers in the state of Maryland. Some of our neighboring states have sales tax exemptions for computer equipment for these types of facilities. If enacted, this would provide for a similar sales tax exemption here in the state of Maryland at 2 different rates depending on whether you're a Tier 1 county or you're not a Tier 1 county. Kent County is a Tier 1 county. As defined, it has to do a lot with the unemployment rates, the household income rates, and the program that this falls under is called More Jobs for Marylanders. So in the county of Kent, should this pass, and there was a data center that made $2 million worth of improvements and there were 5 new qualified positions established. The data center would qualify for this exemption for up to 10 years. So our delegation, specifically Senator Hershey, is asking for support from you. The Economic Development Commission has voted to support this bill.
Make a motion to support.
Second that.
Is there any other discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
And second, we have a HIP, a Housing Improvement Program Certificate of Satisfaction in front of you. The mortgage lien has been fully met the requirements of the lien that it's been reviewed by council and staff, and it's ready for signature with your approval.
That's always a good one to approve. I make a motion to approve.
So.
Second.
That all for books.
Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Terrific. Okay, the few report out items that I have for you tonight. At the last meeting, February 19th, we discussed 2 bills, Senate Bill 280 companion, House Bill 166, and House Bill 513. The first being for the Fight for 15, the minimum wage bill, otherwise known as, and the second is establishing a regional career and technical education school within the 5-county district. That would be enabling legislation. And you had moved forward with a letter of opposition or a stand of opposition for the first and a letter or a support position for the second, and we forwarded those letters along to the legislature. We have received a letter from the mayor of Chestertown, Mayor Serino, requesting that the county take into consideration a tax set-off during the budget process. He really was asking on behalf of the 5 municipalities, and that does not mean it would have to be the same, the request wouldn't have to be the same, nor if approved, the payout would be the same for each of the 5 municipalities, but just that we consider this during the budget process. What I would recommend is that we invite Mayor Serino and the other municipalities to join us for one of the budget work sessions.
Is he asking for the county to have a lower tax rate for the municipal residents, or is he asking for payment?
Either or. So tax rebate is a chunk of money, a check that will be given back to the town, or a tax differential is a lower tax rate for the residents that live in town, and this would be for duplication of services. For example, a very clear one is roads. Another one is planning and zoning. Each of the towns has their own planning and zoning, so they're not even using, for the most part, the county planning and zoning. County does their own roads, the towns do their roads. So for those types of duplication of services, would you consider, is the question to you during the budget process, would you consider some sort of tax offset, either as a differential or rebate? Any questions? Sultana Foundation requested a letter of support. This is for officially the Sultana Education Foundation. This is a 2019 grant application to the Maryland Heritage Areas Authority for a project that they are referring to as the Lawrence Wetlands Preserve. Support for that project. On February 21st, there was a Class C beer, wine, and liquor per diem license issued with your approval for a memorial service to be held that was held on February 24th, which was why it happened when it did. And finally, there are some memos attached for your information regarding liquor license updates. The first is a prorated amount was issued to the Fish Whistle that was formerly located on Cannon Street for their license upon the closure of the establishment. And second, on December 4th, you had approved a Class B beer, wine, and liquor license with a caterer's privilege for the Pearl on Main in Rock Hall. And as of the 8th of February, they had health department approval, so that was the date, their effective date of the upgraded license. And that's all I have for you this evening.
Thank you. Is there any public comment or media review?
Next amendment, industrial.
Oh, yeah. We need to add for the animal shelter to the text amendment that will be coming before us.
It'll come before you in April.
We want to add the industrial zoning to that. So we will be talking to Amy to have her add that.
You'd like the planning commission to
Planning
consider
commission to
adding
consider it
Right,
and
so
add
it's right now, it's crossroads.
commercial
It's
crossroads
crossroads
and
and
agriculture
zoning.
for districts that could house an animal shelter.
Like I say, we want to add industrial to that also.
So is that an official motion? Would you like to send that back to planning?
I make the motion that we ask the planning commission to consider a request of having industrial zoned land added to the zoning text amendment that's been put forth by the animal hospital.
And I'll second that.
Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
I will.
I second.
There's no discussion. We adjourn.